turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hello, Tim.
Well, hello, Ryan.
Funny seeing you here.
What a weird coincidence.
Well, while we're here, Tim...
just appeared on my computer screen.
I did. It's been a while. And hello, everyone who may be joining us. We are happy to have you here. We welcome you here. Where is here? This is Dismembering Horror, the podcast show where myself, Ryan McDuffie, and...
myself, Tim Aslin.
We dismember a horror film. Every week we talk about what worked for us, what did not work for us, and anything else we, Ryan McDuffie and Tim Aslin, found interesting or noteworthy about a horror film. Isn't that right, Tim?
Boy, is that right.
And we have now left Scream-tober after covering all 4 Scream movies, right?
How sad.
We'll be back for Scream 5 someday, I'm sure.
Oh.
But
I keep avoiding... I keep seeing little, like, headlines and like news articles of things that are happening on the set of Scream 5 and what it means.
Right.
I keep like trying not to read it. I'm like, no, avert your eyes.
Ditto.
I want to know.
So just to take a little bit of time to sort of do some retrospective to our retrospective, Tim, of Scream. Yeah, funny that you mentioned that. I did see like a fake Scream 5 trailer that, someone made using from like the TV show footage and, footage of the actors, Scream 4 footage, whatever. And it looked like it was kind of the story that we were coming up with, of it being more of like a multiple Ghostface killers, like kind of springing up.
They must have listened to us.
Or it's just out there, up there, in there, But Tim,
wait,
kind of
are you trying to say that our ideas aren't critically unique?
Correct. Well,
wow.
They're unique, but maybe not unto us.
Right.
As all ideas are. I kind of like what we did last year, Tim, reflecting back on having watched a series of films. Do you have any just kind of parting words, some just sort of reflective thoughts on what the films mean to you now after this latest viewing?
I think that there are some things to take away. One, strike while the iron is hot, right? It served them in making the second movie like right away.
Mm-hmm.
2, do not get rid of the writer.
Uh-huh.
And 3, time helps a lot of the time, right? Having a gap. So it's sort of both ends of that idea of like strike where the iron is hot, but also know when it's time to take a break and like come back around to it. And I think that those things really served the franchise. And, now we're getting another version of that break with the original writer, right? Or no? Is Kevin Williamson doing 5?
He's executive producing.
Okay, so we'll find out how that works, because it'll be kind of a combination of 3 and 4 in that sense, right? Time off, but like not having the original writer. So if you were going to be, really kind of hardcore about what I said initially, that keep the original writer and allow time, this will determine whether or not what I just said has any basis.
No, I agree. I was kind of like, think we did say at the end of last episode, like, I'm totally fine with just them making a new Scream every 15 years to like,
mm-hmm.
like that's how to
right.
do it. It serves itself for that.
Yeah. I think once the first pop happened, the third movie probably didn't need to happen, whatever it was, 2 years later. You know what I mean? Like that one, they probably could have. Honestly, that movie could perfectly well not exist, and I think the 1, 2, and 4 would be like a very good trilogy.
So, and I should say, Tim, I do have something to share from a friend and listener that I thought could be, at least for now, a fun little send off for the Scream series. And if should you care to hear it, I'd love to read it.
God, I would be thrilled.
So this is actually all about, remember we were touching up on the title, and we mentioned how, in Things of Note, how the original title for Scream was Scary Movie.
That's right.
So this is sort of breaking down why Scream is the far better title than Scary Movie in a way that we didn't quite get at. And so this is from our dear friend and listener, Jesse, who is a person of languages, who is both studied and enthused with linguistics and language. So he's able to offer us that perspective. So here we go. First off, the title Scary Movie only operates on the level of winking meta description. It's a scary movie about scary movies, get it? And while it points to the more playful, self-reflexive elements of the film, that's about all it's doing. In fact, Scary Movie is a much better title for the 2000 Scream spoof Scary Movie due to the irony of it not actually being a scary movie at all. Scream, on the other hand, does a lot more work as a title. The word scream is both a noun and a verb, and the title plays on that semantic ambiguity. It commands the characters and audience alike to do the very thing the movie is about, to scream a scream, to react in fear. But we don't just scream when we're scared. We also scream when we're having fun. Think riding a roller coaster, cheering for a favorite team, or coming down with a bad case of Beatlemania. We scream for both chills and thrills. And while the characters in the movie only perform one kind of scream, we as the audience get to do both. In this way, the title plays on the tonal variation of a film that knows it's both terrifying and a hell of a good time all at once. There may be no other scary movie that captures this balance as perfectly as Scream, and the film's title sets us up for this fun, frightening meta experience from the get-go.
Nailed it.
Thanks, Jesse.
It's spot on. Absolutely.
Great. Well, as much as I'd love to just keep talking about Scream, we're back to our regular scheduled programming this week with a hat pull film we watched and are going to be talking about our bud Nicolas Pesce's film Piercing from 2018. Isn't that right, Tim?
Boy. It is right.
Great.
I'm a little at a loss for words, but let's get into it.
All right, we're going to get into it here, as we always do, by watching the trailer first. So here it is from 2018, Piercing.
I seem to have left something in my room. Have a good night, sir.
I see this playing out in one of three ways. You want to know?
Oh, yeah, of course. That's why I called you. The victim has to be a prostitute.
Your guest is on the way out.
Thank you. The first step is to get her tied up and gagged. She'll probably try to run and scream.
Is everything all right, sir?
Everything's fine.
You could still kill him.
What?
The first one, she knows what's going on.
I want a way to remember this.
She's being fake. The second one is, but she's like crazy and wants to die. So take her home and stop her, right?
Yeah. What's the third?
Piercing film.
All right, Timbo, per our rating system, would Tim tell Tim to avoid it, stream it, rent it, or buy it?
Tim would tell Tim, ooh, it's close. It's a real close one, but I'm going to still say it's a rent. But it's almost a buy. Yeah, it's almost a buy. It almost gets there for me. Not quite, but it got real close.
Got it. Well, I'll agree with that rating. Rent it. I said rent it because the the it of it I just loved. The setting, performances, just all these outward things were just so cool and interesting, and just left of center enough to really engage me in a film. It's
actually that's one of the things that I really liked about this. Literally left of center shots.
yeah, exactly. Well shot. So all that stuff, but it could just be, I don't know, needing to see it again. But I was very much left wanting more in a not good way.
That's actually why it didn't hit a buy for me.
Yeah,
is specifically that I was like ready for it to really go to the far end of oh shit, and it ends.
Yeah,
and I kind of get it. I think I get why as a storyteller and why, because this is based on a novel, right? I'm pretty sure it is.
Yep, it is.
And obviously, I haven't read it, so if the novel ends like the movie abruptly, then that's what you do. So you're bound to that. But
right.
I think that I agree with you. It as a movie felt like it was asking, or we were asking for more.
Well, from the little digging I did, it's based on the novel Piercing by Ryu Murakami, who is not an unfamiliar name to us because we dismembered Audition, one of our favorites. And that's based on his book, Audition. So you can see some similarities now. But
yes.
From what I gathered, that the book has it's just, you get a lot more of, I don't know if it's just their inner monologue or their backstory, but there's just a whole nother layer that you get of their character that just isn't happening here. And I just feel like I couldn't help but think there's just something that needed to be filmically done to just lift what the book was doing that's not going on here.
Yeah. It's tough. I always am kind of fascinated by the ways that filmmakers and screenwriters choose to translate a book into film, because I think, well, I don't know if you agree with this. My opinion is that you just simply cannot do a one-to-one, translation of a book to film. Like, it just doesn't work. You can't just take the dialogue from the book. You can't do every moment. It's a totally different medium. And so you have to figure out a way to make it a film and take the elements from the book or novel, story, and find out how to make a film, right? Like, you can't make a sculpture and then paint the sculpture, like make a painting of the sculpture and expect to have it have the same impact. It's different. It's a different medium. And I think the examples that pop into my mind of times when filmmakers and writers were able to really, really take the core elements from a novel and turn it into almost its own thing, but still retain the essence of the novel and have it become a great film. Like, the one that always comes to mind is LA Confidential, because the book and the movie are very, very different monsters, but at their core, they're doing the same thing and telling the same story. And it's a really, really challenging thing to do.
Well, sorry, listeners, we didn't read this novel Piercing as preparation for this discussion. But yes, agreed.
I don't prepare. What are you talking about?
Well, Tim, in your state, whether you're prepared or not, you better be prepared just enough to give us our summary here. How about that?
Okay, here we go. Ready? Reed is married and has a infant child. And I think we get a pretty quick indication that he's not super satisfied with his life. He decides that it's finally time to act on his long-standing urges to kill somebody. And he decides that it needs to be... He prepares for that. So he chooses to do it in a hotel. He chooses to get a prostitute. He plans it out. He tests how he's going to do it. He actually pantomimes going through it, all of the above, right? So
how did you gather that he is just fulfilling a long-standing desire to kill?
Well, he says so. He literally says it.
I missed that.
He says something to the effect of, I did this when I was, I think, a teenager, and I've resisted doing it again until now.
He says that like way down the line, but not at the beginning.
So no, you're right. At the beginning, you really don't know. But what you do know is that he's having the urge. Because in the opening shot, you see him holding an ice pick over his infant daughter's chest, like he's going to kill the kid, which is pretty upsetting, to say the least. And I think that actually really sets us up to go, okay, he's dealing with some stuff. And then, I guess later down the line, you get the confirmation of sort of the context of all of that. He's got a plan. He's pretty what would you call it? He's not inept, but he's kind of a dope. Like it's like it's kind of like the person who's like, what's the big deal? Baseball doesn't look that hard. I could go hit a home run.
Wait, I didn't get that from his character at all. He struck me more like he's the fastidious, in his head, like over planner. You know,
he is, but when he's faced with actually following through and doing any of the things that he's fastidiously planned for, and he's thrown, to continue a horrible baseball analogy, he's thrown the first curveball, he completely falls apart.
Yeah.
And like cannot recover. And it's like, yeah, dude, you're in over your head. Like killing somebody is hard.
He's thrown a very large curveball. In his defense.
Well, I mean, I think the first curveball, so the prostitute shows up and pretty much fucks with his plan right off the bat, because he's like planned how the conversation is going to go, and it doesn't really go that way. And he kind of falls apart, and she's like, okay, well, you're being weird, so I'm going to go take a shower. You know what I mean? So like, even right in the very first interaction they have, it's not working. But then we get to the real, I would say he gets hit. Let's just keep it going. He gets hit by a pitch next. Because she spends this horrible, I hate sports analogies. Just so we're clear that this actually makes my stomach turn to using them. So she takes too long in the bathroom. He opens up and he discovers that she has been in there stabbing her thigh, her quadricep, repeatedly with scissors.
Yeah.
Looks like little scissors. And so now we know we're in some pretty serious oh shit territory, that he's not he's the crazy one, but he's not the only crazy one.
Right. And that sort of is takes us down that road. That's right.
So we get to go down this long path with the two of them kind of playing tennis with their craziness.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out like, well, what is real? What's in each other's, like, what's an imagined thing? Because clearly both these people are suffering from some form of psychosis, however you want to define it. And that's a fun ride. And then I think we kind of get into a more of a conversation about fetish and about pleasure and what the boundaries of fetish sort of culture and S&M and BDSM how do you say this? BDSM?
Yep.
Yeah, BDSM. Wow, that sounded
the way
very
you
strange
say it
coming out of
makes
my
it
mouth.
sounds like it's because you were saying it like a word and not just a letters.
Yeah.
BDS. You're saying BDSM.
Beatism. Yeah. That's not a thing. Anyway, so
BDSM.
I think that the movie really takes off at that point when it becomes kind of this exploration of both really his psychosis and her worldview that revolves around fetishism.
Well,
And it's a fun ride.
So yeah, if you're starting to speak about how it's a fun ride, is that our cue to move to our next section here?
Yeah. Well, so I guess to end the summary, we really kind of get to that point of, okay, this is the two of them kind of coming to a, what would you call it? It's kind of almost an agreement of where they're at in their two sort of mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
And then the movie ends. And then so it feels like we haven't quite gotten we don't get an answer, but it's, that we come to some catharsis, I think, sort of, almost.
Let's see. All right. Well, for our next section then, that was a great summary. Thank you, Tim. We're going to talk about what worked. So here we go. What worked?
What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm. Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Did you have a train you wanted to continue there? Should we just get off some of the obvious things first?
Let's backtrack. Let's do some obvious stuff, because I think, yeah.
Well, it's such almost like a play. We got to just shout out the performances first and foremost, I feel like. Each one of them. And I say each one of them, meaning, of course, our two leads, Christopher Abbott as Reed and Mia Wasikowska, if that's how you say her name, as Jackie. And then the real supporting player just made so much of her moments was Mona, Reed's wife, who's played by Layla Costa.
I think it's Leah. I don't know, actually.
Laia.
She's Spanish.
Yeah. Anyway, she like
Laia?
that. I don't know. Either way, she was great. That midpoint, I don't know if it was a midpoint scene, but towards the middle.
Seems about right. Yeah.
When it's one of the fun little twist things that made me perk up is when it turns out she's in on his plans. We think he's treating it like an affair. He's going behind her back. And then
is she?
Oh, he's just right. He's just talking to her as a voice in his head for advice. Well,
I love the ambiguity of that scene.
You know what? That
think
would
it's
actually
really
work,
great.
Tim, because I guess what would work is her job that her acting is just so naturalistic and brought me right in. And what I noticed something about his acting too that would be reflective as far as how he's someone I buy being able to accurately picture how someone would actually be is because when he's rehearsing the scenes in the hotel at the beginning for how to kill her, it's like you wouldn't know that she's not there if you were just watching one shot as a movie. He is acting so well in that moment in the meta sense,
Yeah.
Which is then just great in the non-meta sense for his performance too.
This is some of the better acting I mean, these three actors are really, really fantastic. I've seen him before for sure. He was in It Comes at Night, and he's great in it.
Okay.
Like, he is that movie's great too, but he is phenomenally good in It Comes at Night. So I was not surprised that he was phenomenal in this as well. Mia Wasikowska, I've seen, but I don't know much about. I couldn't really remember where she's the lead in Crimson Peak.
Yeah, but she's also the lead in the one that you suggested I watch, Stoker.
Right. That's right. Stoker is so good and so appreciated, I think. That movie is fucking great. And honestly, more people need to know about it. I love that movie. Anyway, so she is great. I still haven't finished Crimson Peak, so, and it's its own thing. So it's less about, I think, the acting and more about the
lest we forget the $1 billion grosser Alice in Wonderland. She's in that, and its sequel is Alice.
That's true. That's right. But everybody's so good, and the Spanish woman who plays Mona, whose name we can't pronounce because we're dumb, our friend Mikey raved and raved and raved about her because she's in that movie Victoria. Do you know about this movie?
No.
I think I need to see it, honestly, now that I've seen her, because our friend was like, dude, this actress is unbelievable in this movie, and how did she not get more recognition, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of just wrote it off to him being he's a very excitable person. And so I was like, okay, he's just excited. But now I'm like, okay, he was probably onto something. Because she is quite good in a very, very minimal role in this. So I get it. Anyway, that's all to say that that stuff just by itself, these actors are phenomenal, but they are what they're doing in the context of the writing of the film and the filming of the film is so good. Everything's so cohesive, and it all fits so well. I don't almost know how to explain how you get that to work. Why?
I mean, one thing they're doing so well is, as disparate as some of their previous actions seem to whatever moment they're watching, they really are cat and mousing each other,
Yeah.
There is some kind of continuity of sense and through line that they're holding on to in their performance. They're just at the hospital, and then and she was just stabbing herself in the leg repeatedly. And then this happened. Now they're back at her place, and she was talking about soup. Yet that's so just not the next moment we're on to. Yet they make all that work somehow.
It really does. I think it's a testament to the director being able to. I mean, it is the writing. The writing is really, really good because the writing constantly keeps us kind of off our pins, so to speak. We're tipping back and forth constantly. And I love that. But in the filming of that reality, it's really intimately filmed, which I love. It's filmed in a lot of ways it's kind of what's that? I think it's sort of like a European romance filming. I don't know what to compare it to exactly. We're pretty up in their faces a lot, but then we get these moments that it's you have this weird, cool duality, I think, in how it's filmed, where you go from these really intimate close-ups that are really pretty, and we get to really be in with the person's face and feeling what they're feeling. And then we pop out to these really, really beautiful pastiches of often very close symmetry shots of the set that are, generally speaking, like I was saying, just a little off center. And they're almost Wes Anderson feeling, which I love. And I don't know, there's just a lot. Everything is sort of adding up to this vibe, like the art direction, the set, the sort of the coloring. All of those things are creating this dual feeling of, wow, that's really beautiful, but also a little unsettling. And I think that they're doing that in the performance as well. And they're capturing that in the filming of it. It's so you kind of have this discomfort and comfort, I guess, with everything in the movie constantly, which is so cool to me because, like, if you are talking about thematically fetishism, one of the things that I think is so fascinating about the idea of having fetishes is that, in a way, fetishes are a method to actually keep some distance from actual intimacy. But it's cased in this idea of that it's intimate to do these things that are whatever they are, right? Like if you're into this, that, or the other thing, the focus becomes the fetish, and that's a way to distance yourself from actual intimacy.
I don't know, because that I see as the opposite, because like if you're talking about role playing or something like, okay, wait, you have something else to say, sorry.
Well, I think at its foundation that's what's actually going on with fetishes, but how that experience plays out is almost what I think you're kind of getting at. We interpret the outcome differently than that, what I think is the fundamental sort of truth of what fetishes are accomplishing. So it's this, again, it is this duality of comfort and discomfort at the same time.
I guess I disagree. I think fetishism is like, I don't think it's less intimate. I think it's more intimate because you're accessing parts of yourselves that are more like open and honest or desired. But I think
I think that would come down to how you define intimacy.
Okay. I mean, I think of it as a more like a whatever's more open and honest exchange of just your in the moment self, and as well as sides of yourselves.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I'm not an expert in it, but I my personal take on intimacy and on fetishism is that it is a bit of a obstruction toward what my version of true intimacy would be.
So
let's put it that way.
I think the ending gets at these two people have reached a true intimacy in the way that maybe he and his wife haven't. Because
I agree. I think that's the success of where the whirlpool of this movie gets to. Like, that is the drain or whatever of the story. Is that we get to this point where it's all kind of coalescing at this moment of, oh, we get each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that is intimacy, I think.
Right.
So,
which you can only get to a lot of the times if you're exploring each other's fetishes. You see?
That may or may not be true. But I agree that that's a possible way to look at it.
I do agree that the end outcome, though, as far as like taking, what did you put? Not the good with the bad, but these two different extremes of, you could
comfort
say,
and discomfort.
Comfort, discomfort, pain and pleasure, yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
It's all built in there. Could that even be, you mentioned the art design and the production design, all that stuff, like, I loved wholeheartedly right next to the performances, where, kind of speaking of, the dualism dichotomy or whatever, the way the buildings all looked like models, but at the same time, right. But at the same time, they didn't look fake, as in like when the pigeons were flying by. Like, I feel like I've seen in movies where it's like CG skyline shot that's supposed to be real buildings and pigeons fly by, and I go, that looks fake. But here
they're
it
like
looked
comped
like
in badly.
it brought me it like made it seem real in a way. And I guess what I will say, why I didn't say outwardly like, you know, they are all models, is this because there was the fun of, there were some shots in there, Tim, do you remember when they pulled up in the taxi out by the hospital and there were like all the buildings behind them? I'm like, those look fake like before, but at the same time they don't. They also just look like really well lit actual buildings.
I thought the same thing.
My brain just couldn't decide which they were, and that was just so cool.
Yeah. I was like, at first I was like, man, those look like models, buildings. Oh, but maybe they're just, you know, it's 2018. Like we're pretty good. If you get the right CGI person, we can make that digitally and make it look like a model. I was like, so I don't know, which did they do? And then in the credits, you see that there was an actual model, like miniature team.
Right.
And I was like, oh shit, they made them. They're real. Like they're physically real in space things that they shot in camera. That's fucking cool.
Of course, yeah, some of those shots that were clearly that, but it wasn't so obvious like in that one moment. It felt like
I know.
Really
and so then you get that's an even more impressive sort of, feat, one way or the other, however they did it, whether they comped in models into that shot, which is possible, or they just found a location that really, really works for that aesthetic.
Yeah.
Both work really, really well. It's lit so the whole movie looks so fucking good. There's only like one thing in the entire movie that I was like, that could be better in terms of look. Well, so, man.
I gotta mention, so the models, whatever, those count as the exterior, and they're all working to put us in a movie world. You know, I like to use it like storybook world or making it feel like a play, but it's a movie world that it puts us into, which it just worked so well for the kind of, maybe this author's writing, it gets to a similar sort of, you know, what's real, what's not place, not as explicitly as Audition, but definitely the aesthetics lent itself to that thing. Which, but I just got to mention the interiors too, Tim. I loved so much of the set design, the art design. Both the hotel and her apartment were like, oh, I want to stay here. I want to live here in a way. Like, but there's still an eeriness to them, but I like that. You know?
Her apartment, I guess it's an apartment. It feels like it's a hotel room in and of itself in a way.
It felt like it reminded me, I haven't seen it for a bit, but it reminded me of the Blue Velvet apartment, you know, where it all goes down.
Oh, yeah.
Her apartment.
I really, really love it. It's such a weird thing to think of, but it made me think of, I think it's probably the context of the movie too, but it made me kind of think of, there's a hotel in Los Angeles that is famous for a woman kind of acting mysteriously and then disappearing, and they ended up finding her body in the water tower tank on top of the hotel, and she had died. And there's this borderline, I guess, sort of Art Deco-ness. It's like an era, but everything's a little worn and everything's saturated. Like, and I mean that, like, I feel like the wood has saturated whatever years of just people living there. It's all in burgundies and browns and like navies.
I loved in the hotel room the full vintage collection of National Geographics filling those deep shelves.
Dude, I mean, stuff like that. I don't know even really where or why you come to that as your design stuff, but fuck, it works so well.
Her apartment, the carpet, and those like psychedelic inlays behind the glass shelves. Oh my God, I loved it.
Yeah. that the like transitional design of the wall between the living area and the kitchen, it's like a couple steps up and you get these like kind of curved, it's not a banister, but it's like, I don't know what you call it, honestly, but there's just all of that design stuff. It's so pleasing. And and like you said, it is off-putting in a weird way too. Like, it's that same thing. It's like comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time. It's and like I said, like the context of what's happening adds to that, because I mean, this is a really good example of matching tone visually to the content of the character's actions.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love that, because you could shoot this a totally different way, right? You could have it be in contrast to where the characters are, and light it really brightly, and have it be like, you know, nice sort of comfortable colors, like bright colors, lots of like, I don't know, blue, like light blues and I don't know, sort of pale yellows and stuff like that. And that would, in a certain way, potentially make us kind of feel like, oh, this is all kind of safe and warm and pleasant. And I think that is a cool you could go in that direction, but
something
this other way, woo, it works so well.
What it's doing, the locations, the colors, all that, it feels like it's a good place in that it feels supportive of exploring fetishes. Does that make sense? Like,
yes, it does. It's like, it really does work that you go, oh yeah, if this is the room that we're going to do this in.
Yeah. It's like, oh sure. Yeah. A person in leather does not look out of place in these rooms, you know,
right. Oh man, the yellow phone of the hotel.
Right. That was a cool phone.
So good. Like, all of that shit is really, really good.
Well, clearly we could go on about this production design, but I just had a quick list of things that were like moments I really perked up, that were like, okay, here's the movie happening. It's just, you know, the kept me going kind of moments. Towards the beginning, of course, the baby talking, which
oh yes.
Which that's a first indication of like, this is where I'm waiting for the movie to go, kind of thing, you know, what I was wanting. Then that did kind of that first twist of, we're like, where's this going, when she's in the hotel room with him and they're first talking and she goes to take a shower. Okay. And she's stabbing herself. It's like she's already doing the self-harm that he was planning on inflicting on her. Like, what a just sort of on point thematically wrench to throw in the gears. It was great. And then what we already talked about, I wasn't reading it in the moment as a possible, that he was imagining it, but the idea of his wife being in on it too. The location move just to her apartment was great. You know, I thought for a bit we might be in the hotel the whole time, but, you know, changes the power dynamic in a fun way. And then also her drugging him, which is just... you know, knowing his plan and going in is such just, there goes that in a way.
I think that thematic thing of like predator prey reversal is so fun. And they do a really good job of not making it kind of cliche or dorky. It just feels appropriate. And I think that's because the characters are so well constructed. Mm-hmm. Like, you totally, I felt like I understood all of the characters' point of view within seconds of meeting them.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
The other just a little moment I really liked was the difference we hear in her employer, quote, pimp, whoever it is, when the business talks to him and takes his call. Oh, sure. Yes, we should have someone there in about an hour. And then we get the message she receives on the other side, and it's this disgusting, abusive, like, get over there, and you're just like, ugh. Anyway, that's just another moment that stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the next big moment that really hit was when we start to kind of dive into his psychosis and his flashback sequence, or dream sequence, I guess, when he's drugged.
Well, that's when it... Right. The moment he's drugged is like, it was the comparison akin to an audition, when that's in the hotel room and he gets, and then everything turns similar. But that was, I was kind of like a, here we go kind of thing,
Yep. Yeah. I really love it. I love, part of it too is that you can get in trouble when you do this sort of like, how would you describe this way of storytelling? You're kind of in a dream, but everything is symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the imagery and what he's seen is actually us as an audience being able to have the onion peeled back and see where his psychosis is kind of coming from, but all within this dream-like, seemingly kind of random and bizarre imagery. I love those moments in movies. Like, they're very exciting to me because in a way it's like all bets are off, but you have the foundational storytelling that you're trying to get across, and you can do it in metaphor and you can do it literally, and you can kind of, it's a dream, so you can kind of do whatever the fuck you want, which I love.
And kind of, and this is where maybe, I got to give it the credit for saying is doing the thing that I wanted more of, or it wasn't doing enough of, where I like, that's presumably his mother, maybe, who's the woman in those shots. Anyway, we get some sort of like something as a kid or a young teenager, but I think he was a kid, was like, there's shit going down that involved violence and piercing and possible death.
Yeah, I think the ambiguity actually helps because we do not need direct answers. We need thematic or broad strokes. And since it's a dream, you can kind of mix and match. It doesn't all need to be literal. But what we do get is that there was some pretty bad abuse, some lack of boundaries, some, sexualization at a young age, and there was violence. And whether or not any of that actually happened to him, we know that it's in his psychosis, right? Like, it's in his psyche, I guess is a better way of saying it. And so it accomplishes in a really pleasing visual way just us getting on board with kind of who he is and where his brain actually is at. We should not like him, right? Like, on paper, he's psychotic. He's definitely a psychopathic murderer. And so we fundamentally should not like him. But understanding him, and this is actually kind of one of the main reasons I enjoy true crime and stuff like that so much, and actually go down the rabbit hole of like serial killers, is because I don't like serial killers, but I am fascinated by the psychology of how a human being gets to a point of doing such awful things. Well, and I think this movie actually gives us kind of a window into that in a way. And to make us go, yeah, he's still... That's why the ending actually is great in this respect, because it allows us, the whole movie allows us to see two people that ostensibly we should not like, and we understand them at least on some level enough to be like, okay, I get it. Like, they're human beings, and as troubled as they may be, they're having a human connective moment. And that's important. Right. And I love all of that. But even sort of to kind of go back to the dream sequence, the metaphor of like him killing the older woman or whatever in the bathtub and having the room fill up with like sewer water and him drowning and having the little, What is that little thing, do you think?
The what?
There's that little creature that comes out of the toilet.
Oh, right.
What do you think that is? That one, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to think. I think it's cool.
I think it's just supposed to be like, it just is exactly how it makes you feel. It's like a little gross creature that crawls out of the toilet. It's just supposed to be blackness.
It's like his shame in a way. I mean, I think you could call it a bunch of different things, but it accomplishes that thing where it's sort of both.
I loved when it like let out like what it actually did. It didn't bite him. It like let out this like veiny, like viscous liquid that was running into his eye. Oh, so good.
I love that because it's so up for interpretation.
Yeah.
And it's great.
See,
so
that's
that
the
whole
stuff
sequence, that's the movie. You know what I mean? To me, that's
when it finally caught up to the promise
Yeah.
of the talking baby at the beginning.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And when you were kind of talking about, you know, getting his background, his psyche, his psychosis, a little moment or a little touch that did a lot for me as far as just who is this guy and and navigating how you feel about him at any given moment was, I forget if it was just in his journal, but if he said it, but there was some kind of admission on his part to, you know, he probably does, or I think, it's written. He goes, that would probably be totally okay if if my plans did fail and she ended up killing me. Like, would that really be such a bad thing?
That's right.
Like where he totally admits it's just sort of an admission to this is all just a sort of desire-based thing, and there is no morality outside of it, as if, you know, if he's killing someone, there's nothing saying that, well, the better outcome is he doesn't, or someone kills him, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it kind of puts into focus a little bit more the metaphor of what that little creature is.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the squirmy, gross, sticky, infectious nastiness inside of us that we're bad, that we don't want to get into us, and we want to keep it away from us all the time. But, you know, sometimes it gets you.
It squirts its little viscous veiny fluid into your eye.
Yeah.
Talking about
sorry. I love when we suddenly cut, when he's first hallucinating, we just hard cut to two people in full head to toe leather, just plowing into each other in the bathroom.
Of course.
That cracked me up because it's a little cartoonish.
Yeah.
They're going a little fast. I loved it.
You know, it feels like it could definitely be some weird memory as a kid or something like that. Something he walked into. And where then a bug creature monster did or did not crawl out. Just other I guess I gotta give credit where credit was due, just as far as like it sounds so simple to do, but getting across that visceralness of needles and points and blades and just feeling it and just going and just getting that visceral reaction out of me, whether it was when we first saw her stabbing her leg and I just, you know, like, oh, geez, stop. And then there's these wonderful close-ups where it's towing that line of, you know, almost when we see someone getting stabbed, we're able to go, it's just an effect. But when we see, in this case, the ice pick, like kind of, you know, at a good amount of pressure gliding along someone's torso, there's that's real. And we feel like, oh, if there was just that much more pressure, it would penetrate.
Well, and they did a very brilliant thing, I think, in when you show her piercing her nipple, we get the visceral reality of how much pressure it takes to penetrate the layer of skin, and it's a cathartic kind of thing, right? Like you're pushing, then boom, it pops through, right? That by showing that in this sort of smaller way, it primes our brains for that feeling of the moment that the skin actually breaks and is penetrated.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she's holding the ice pick and pushing it against his torso, like moments later, we have just been so primed for that cathartic moment of penetration where it actually pierces the skin that our brains are just going, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And then having it not actually happen is a pretty ballsy thing to do. But I think is right? Like it speaks sort of back to the fetish thing. It's the anticipation of a thing. You know, one aspect of the fetish stuff is that, you know, the teasing nature of things, or the torture-ish nature of, is it going to happen? Are you going to go through with it? Like, when is the moment of like impact or catharsis, or in this case piercing, going to actually occur? It is tantamount to the moment of climax, right? Like, this release moment will happen when the skin is pierced. And so all of that build up and anticipation for that is really effective. And I think is having it end there is accomplishing something effective.
Mm-hmm.
The end.
Yeah, that when she pierces her nipple, that got to me in a way where, like, I didn't have that separation of this is only a movie, because as soon as I tried to get in that safe place, I'm like, wait, people actually do this to themselves. What the fuck? Like,
yeah, they sure do.
Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of wraps up what I have too. Is anything else? Forever hold your peace.
I'm pretty well. It's good.
Cool. Yeah, I had fun. All right. Well, then for our next section, we'll see if there was anything that did not work for us in What Did Not Work.
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
Well, like we mentioned at the beginning, I still couldn't help but feel like I was wanting more, and in a not good way, because that is also can be a very good thing, left wanting more. Maybe I got to see it again. I don't know. I was wanting to know more about them in a way. I was wanting to be a bit more plugged into their motivations for each moment, or for each action, crazy action they took. Like, I was enjoying the back and forth, but I just felt a little behind, and in a not good way, which usually I'm saying these are all things that I do like. So that's why I'm a little at a loss too.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that this movie, it's 81 minutes, right? It's brisk, which I love, but 5 more minutes, I think would have made me not feel like I was missing out on some finality.
Yeah, 5 more minutes.
I don't know what those 5 minutes should be.
Yeah, just something. I mean, if we kind of said, the end point was them experiencing intimacy, where sort of a mutual understanding or intimacy with each other. Just something that could have gotten us to that point, like a little more. I don't know.
You know why I think it actually leaves us with this feeling is that we kind of have, let's see, 1, 2, 3. We kind of have like 4 setups in a way of potential final outcomes. One is some sort of, is the setup of his family relationship. So that there's no resolution to that in any way.
Yeah. 2
is his goal, which is to kill her.
Yep.
I guess it's resolved in that he doesn't kill her. But we don't get sort of like a final sort of whatever, something to that arc.
Yeah.
3 is her relationship with her pimp, or just her relationship with this lifestyle as a thing. That we don't really get sort of a final, like,
right. I feel
as
like
a character, her arc doesn't sort of come to a decision point.
I wonder if in the book there's just sort of these other more emotional arcs. That's
Right.
usually how you do it. If you don't finish these little arcs, you have to just have it be all in service of an emotional arc. And
Yeah.
that's just still what felt like just kind of took me by surprise of not getting, or I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the fourth one would be sort of a reversal that there is a ultimate consequence for Reed, the guy, and that could be any number of things. You know, you could have a coda scene where she's disposing of his body in some way, and so we kind of go, oh, that's where it went. And he got, in a way, maybe he got what he deserved because his intention was to do something terrible, and it didn't work out. In fact, it backfired.
Right.
And
We
now
did
he's
not
dead.
we did not mention he gets really beat up by her. He gets
Oh yeah,
with what is that
a
called?
can opener.
It's a can opener she uses. Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gets some deep, wide gashes all along his visage.
You know, or I guess there's a sort of another option. A fifth option could be some sort of coda of their existence, like where this leads for the two of them. I'm not saying you need any of those things
Yeah.
by any means. It's a little like putting a bow on it that I'm not advocating for that in general. But I think it's a fine line to have an abrupt ending without an overt catharsis.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I know even
it's
just
ballsy. I kind of feel, I enjoy it and I don't enjoy it, which speaks to the fucking themes of the movies. So I'm like,
Right.
well, it kind of works.
I guess so in that sense. I know, but just even as far as the level that I thought the violence was going to go didn't reach there, if that was an arc too, or a trajectory more so.
Yeah. What's a good example? So there's this, there's sort of an almost nihilist, is it nihilistic? Feudalistic. I guess it's sort of feudalistic tone to the ending of like, this is like, we've come to this agreement and it's there's a futility as well as a kind of hopefulness. It's very there's a lot going on.
Maybe it is just how we're so trained based on running time too, that it did just feel short
That's
in that
interesting.
sense. Yeah.
But I could see a scene where in some way we get that same kind of feeling, and it would feel, to me, it would fit with this story where it's sort of like we feel like we've come to this intimate moment and we see the two of them kind of accepting and enjoying the ride that we all just went on. And then a totally external thing occurs. But I think that would be, it would speak to his character arc to me. Or that she just kills herself in that moment. She
Yeah.
puts the pick through her throat and then that's it. What it would do to me, and it would make me feel satisfied, is that we spent all this time with this guy who's planning to do this awful thing, to kill another human being. And in the moment where he as a character has actually kind of accepted and been accepted by another human being for what he actually is, the thing that he wanted originally happens, like in simplest form, she dies, but not by his hand. And that, to me, is it's irony, which is, I think, always a good thing to have, but it's also tragic. But it's tragic in a good way in this case, because like he shouldn't kill people. People shouldn't kill people.
Yeah.
And to have that thing that he desired so much taken away from him would make me feel resolved. I would feel like it would be powerful to me. It would feel cathartic and feel impactful and tragic and like there would be finality to it.
Yeah, I
not having that is okay. But I, as a sensibility, it's something I like and want.
I think for me it was more just about how could that. I like the end moment where it is just sort of, it's an end moment because it's sort of cutting you off at a surprise point. So I'm just thinking how, in terms of more how to make that work. And I just think, that's why I just think it has more something, because I wouldn't want to necessarily, I like what you're saying and it's fun to picture, but it just doesn't seem like this movie for me. I do think that ending works of they've reached some kind of equilibrium and we can't, and that's what it's about. And it's sort of whether one gets more comeuppance or one that gets more power over the other. That's, aside the point, who quote unquote wins, that's not the thing. So for me, it's
interesting.
It's just like about how do you just make that, you just feel that gut punch a little more when it does cut off. And I think that, it just has something to do with even maybe if it was more of a back and forth, like if they had more, because like, we kind of fall into the we kind of like without us even realizing, or maybe it's just that it's not enough to fall into the rhythm of like, she takes control of him, then he gets unties himself. It's sort of this back and forth, but it's not this like battle per se, If we had actually fallen into some kind of more back and forth rhythm, so that when they sort of reach an equilibrium, we were sort of realized, the point is there could just go back and forth forever. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't enough going back and forth, to sort of cement that.
I think they could have leaned in. It would have been an added 30 seconds or less of that final moment. But they could have leaned in a little bit on the fact that she's holding the ice pick.
Mm-hmm.
And if his hand goes to the pick or goes on top of her hand, and they have just the fleeting back and forth of understanding in that moment that who gets to have the power to push the thing through him.
Mm-hmm.
And if you milk that moment properly, there's lots of options, but I think ultimately you would want us to see that nonverbal communication between the two of them and have his hand come back off of the thing right before you just see just the suggestion of her putting her weight into it. We could be looking at her face.
Yeah.
But you start to see just her shoulders start to dip, her head start to push forward a little bit like she's about to put it in, and then you cut to fucking black there. We will feel effectively like the cutting to black is the piercing of the skin moment.
Yeah. I think
we could have just milk it. It's there. It's pretty much there.
That's great for the more like out and out horror version, which this was very like giallo inspired.
Yeah.
I feel like you if this is about a fetish that is about inflicting harm on another person, like why not just push that? Like have it so they take each other to the limits where they will die if they go any further. And then that's when they both stop because they kind of have a moment of, well, we've reached a sort of actual life or death equilibrium in this moment. And we're both, that's a direction. I don't know. That just came to mind.
And then we hard cut to them just putting their clothes back on like nothing happened. He like packs up his bag and, walks out the door and.
Ooh, that's an end to that arc. He still gets his somewhat of a thrill without actually needing to kill. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, lots of options,
it?
Obviously. But yeah, I think so. Obviously, we're talking about what didn't work. When you're at this point where you're like you're chomping at the bit for just a little bit more. It's not to say that the ending as is bad. I don't believe that. I think there's a lot of good in the ending that exists. But wanting that much more and being able to come up with options that would have been fulfilling, I think does speak to it's like we just didn't quite get right there. But, so be it. It's fine.
Great. Well, if that's it for...
I
is
have
that
one
it?
other thing.
Okay.
The only other thing was just a technical thing. I just was bummed out by the creature CGI.
I liked... It had...
just was,
Yeah, it was so close. I actually...
very close.
I actually liked it. It did that thing where... I don't know what it's called, where they... Something about, like... it looked better than most stuff like that, I thought.
Sure.
So that's why it didn't bother me quite as much. But
it was a shading issue to me.
well,
Like there's just in the construction of the CGI, it felt like it was like almost missing a layer of shading that would have made it a little more photorealistic in the space. And that bummed me out because I was like, ooh, that's cool. I like the design.
Yeah, I mean, that I was just kind of like, whatever, because it's a surprise if CG like that does look great, you know?
Yeah. It's also a dream, so whatever.
Yeah, but the one that did bug me was in that dream sequence too. I guess it's the older woman, maybe his mother, who they have the sort of gutted stab injury on their stomach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
it didn't look great.
Yeah, it just had this weird like CG like pushing it over the top, just kind of like bulbing going on. And that was just like, just do it without effects. That. It would have been better.
That one would have been fucking fine for a practical effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it, though, for me. Honestly, I think it's a good movie.
Great.
I think we need to talk about Nicolas.
All right. Well, then let's do that in our next section, known as Things of Note.
Things of Note!
This should be interesting.
I just feel like I'm pretty sure we were pretty good about saying, you know, it's not necessarily all on him with The Grudge.
Yeah, so some context. We are 3 for 3 for covering all 3 of Nicolas Pesce's films, feature films on this show. So we did The Eyes of My Mother, and now his middle
Which
film.
we liked.
Yes, we really like. Still my favorite out of his, I think.
Okay.
And then Piercing we just did, and then I was far from impressed with The Grudge, which Tim and I get into, but the most egregious aspects of it were all the stuff that felt like desperate studio meddling. So we like to assume that that is exactly what it was.
And we talked about that, right? Like, I was trying to remember our conversation. Like, we didn't have anything to confirm or deny that that was the reality, but other than our own sense of things. But this movie, to me, really, really confirms or potentially confirms that reality. That Grudge movie is not a Nicolas Pesce movie. It's not. There's no fucking way. There's no way that movie, what we saw in The Grudge, was his intention.
Yeah.
After seeing Eyes of My Mother and this, no fucking way. It's just not, it's not conceivable. Somebody else made him do things or just took over and changed the movie he wanted to make. And, you know, he wasn't allowed to say anything about it because that would be unprofessional. And his name probably shouldn't even be on the directed by for The Grudge, because I just don't believe that he made that movie. I think he made a completely different movie, and the studio freaked the fuck out because it was too art house or whatever dumb label they want to put on it. And they chopped it the fuck up, reshot a bunch of jump scares, and fucking called it a day. And threw him under the bus.
And added all those jump scare sound effects every 12 seconds.
Exactly. I don't believe it. I would love to see his version of that movie. Or at least just get some sort of sense of the reality of how that went. But this is all to say, I'm sorry if I made anybody think that he was not good, because he is fucking good. And that Grudge movie is not a good indication of him as a filmmaker.
I like to have a feeling, Tim, we're going to have an opportunity to ask him privately someday.
Hell yeah. We could track him down.
Yeah. So the only other thing of note that I had here was talking about the giallo influence. Wears it on its sleeve. They use Goblin's main theme that they wrote for Deep Red, which we've covered on the show too.
I knew I had heard it before too. I was like, I know this song.
It sounds just like the Exorcist theme, but it's not exactly.
That's right.
It's like a hair different from the Exorcist theme, but it's that same 5/4 rhythm. Anyway, so they used, I don't know if it was the actual version or just a sort of slight remix of it or whatever, but yeah, they use the theme from Deep Red, getting us into the mood for this movie at the beginning.
I loved all the music choices in this.
Yeah, there's some good stuff.
The other thing that it really came to mind that was more to me noteworthy is the use of that split screen stuff. I feel like potentially he was really kind of drawing off of kind of a De Palma vibe. This movie feels like a modern day Brian De Palma movie to me.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I really, really like it. Like it's like taking a De Palma film and graduating into like a new realm within that thing.
Yeah, we covered Sisters on the show, which we talked a lot about the split screen and that.
Yeah, so I think he, maybe showing some influences or homage type stuff to De Palma is possible. Unknown. When we talked to Nicholas, we'll ask him about that too. But I really liked it. I mean, I like those sort of stylistic choices and the vibe and the music. Like that whole thing felt homage-y. And I like that.
Yeah, it was homage without being mired or too steeped in it.
Yeah, because I remember having this thought of, I was like, okay, if you're doing those things, if you're doing homage type stuff, where's the line between homage and your own original sort of stamp? But I feel like this feels like his movie. It does not feel like he's copying somebody else. It's enough of its own thing.
That line for me is just like, are you using all these things as tools or not?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and he is, and they're effective.
Yeah.
There's a moment of push-in. There's a push-in on Reed's face followed directly by a push-in on the phone. And fuck, it feels so good and so like early 80s, maybe late 70s. But I fucking love it. Like, and of course, like that's the era that I love the most in horror. So like, of course it's feeding into that for me, like 76 to 84 is basically like everything I love. So yeah, maybe it's just that, but I love the style. So good job.
Great.
You did it.
All right. Well, if that's it for Nicholas's film Piercing from 2018. Tim, we got our RecommenDEADtions for this week. Anything you'd like to recommend that you've...
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah?
I watched a movie called... wait a minute. It's called Scare Me? Scare Me?
I watched that too, Tim.
Scare Me?
It is called Scare Me.
Okay, good. I fucking loved it.
I was thinking of you during that.
I loved it so much.
My favorite bit was honestly all the leads were great, but the sound design I thought was killer.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's fucking incredible. In fact, in Piercing, they do a very similar sound design thing. When Reed is pantomiming out the act of all of the things he's going to do to her, they do the sound effects of those actions without her actually being there, right? So he's like, at one point, he's sawing her, and you hear a saw going through flesh and bone. And Scare Me, the whole movie is basically predicated on that. It's two people in a cabin in the woods, like trying to kind of one up each other with scary stories. So they're just narrating a story, but the design and how they film it is they blur the lines of just somebody telling it. So like there are scenes when you hear the actual sound effects of what they're describing in their in their story, or it gets to a point where you actually see the monster that they're telling the story about, or bits and pieces of the monster.
shadow of the monster. Yeah.
Yeah. Stuff like that. It's so fucking cool. So definitely it's on Shudder. Go watch it.
Great. Scare me. All right. I'm going to recommend Dead. Well, I wanted to recommend Dead, Basket Case 2, and Basket Case 3. So this means I have to recommend as a trilogy the Basket Cases. I have seen the first one before, but then, and love that filmmaker, Frank Henlotter, based off of having then seen Brain Damage. I still got to see Frankenhooker. But when I'm like, wait, he wrote and directed 2, follow-ups to Basket Case? I got to see them.
Of course.
And they did not disappoint. They were far, far from they're not the same as the first one, the sequels, but they are an entirely different thing, which I just love so much. In fact, Tim, this is not just excitable praise, but this is, I can't think of anything else. The third one has what may be my favorite scene in any film ever.
Wow. And that is a bold statement to make.
And if you watch it, you will know what it is within a heartbeat.
Okay. Fair enough.
But there's the second and third one, they're just like the best kind of kitschy, ridiculous, like just like stupid humor fun. I love them so much. And the first one's a great grimy low rent classic too. It's actually
I've seen the first one.
His him and Frank Henlotter's sensibility reminds me a lot of the Larry Cohen when we covered the stuff. Yeah. They're both just kind of like, it's just these bad horror movies. You got to get it done, and you got to, of course it's ridiculous,
just
but it can
work.
also be scary. It's also funny. They just have these like go get them, just get it done attitudes, and they just have such a sincere love for stuff that I also love, which is just ridiculous things in essence. Anyway, if you haven't considered giving the whole thing a whirl, please do.
All right.
Give the whole Basket Case trilogy a whirl.
Sweet. Well, shall we pull?
Yes, Tim, and it's your turn.
Is it? Okay, great. Here we go. This one right here. Ooh, Mirrors, it's called. It was submitted by Zach Brown.
All right, Zach, I'm going to finally watch Mirrors with Kiefer Sutherland, thanks to you. So it sounds like you haven't seen it, Tim.
No, I have not.
It's like an aughts horror movie that I totally wrote off, but hey, Zach wants to hear some thoughts and reflection on it, and that's exactly what we're here to do. So cool. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Great. All right. Well, until Mirrors, you can find us wherever you found us. We're at dismemberingwhore.com. We're tell your friends to go there. We got an Instagram, got a Twitter, all that fun stuff. Anything else, Tim?
No, just you guys you're the greatest. All our listeners.
And again, Tim does not sound, he means it despite him sounding so snarky in his tone.
I really mean it.
God damn it. What are you doing?
I mean it. I'm being so serious. I love each and every one of you, even if you're a serial killer. Or, well, maybe not.
Well, you love the fact that even if they're a serial killer, they chose this podcast to listen to.
That's right.
So yes, no matter who you are or where we find
you, don't be a serial
killer. Regardless, we do thank you for being here. So yes, in closing, as I always say, thanks for listening.
And we will see you next time.
Goodbye.